Hi, for this next week, we're going to take a look at a theory of language acquisition called the critical period theory or the critical period hypothesis. And what I like to do is start with a case study. This is the case of a girl named Jeannie. Some of you may have heard of her from other courses. She is talked about in psychology classes, child development classes, so she may be familiar to you. She's a child who did not have any language input or very little language input until she was well past early childhood. So there are some real significant implications for her story, although we have to keep in mind that we're just looking at this one case, and it's difficult to make generalizations about how all humans are because there are so many factors that are involved here. I'll warn you that the case is a pretty sad story if you haven't heard of it already, but it is a fascinating one and one that can teach us a lot about language and the way the brain develops. As you go through this material, I'd like you to keep in mind a real important distinction, and that is the distinction between language acquisition and language learning. So those two terms are not the same thing. Acquisition refers to this subconscious developmental process that happens, for example, in babies when they're acquiring their first language. It really is an innate human process. And then contrast that with language learning, which is something that's done most of the time in a classroom. It's a very conscious process. The learner is studying, memorizing, trying to analyze grammar rules and do it in a very conscious way. So keep those two distinctions in mind. Language acquisition versus language learning. And we're really going to focus on this idea of the critical period for this week. And then next week, that is going to be our jumping off point into second language acquisition. So we're getting into some really interesting and good stuff here. The other thing that I want to tell you about is I'm going to ask you to write a lesson plan for this week. So I've given you a template, and I would say just go ahead and follow that unless you have another one that you really like. It's probably the easiest thing to do. And I like to introduce lesson plan writing for you because I really want you to think about what the objectives are for a given lesson and then tie that to the activities. So really think in your mind, these activities that I'm designing or that I'm going to use, that they really are going to help the student learn or acquire, and also that they can be measured. It's something that can be measured. So that's where the assessments come in. So that's how you know that the student learned, that the activities and the material helped her to develop or learn a new skill. And then it's a little bit unusual because usually when you're writing a lesson plan, it's going to be for a whole class. But what I'm asking you to do is just to write it for Jeannie as if she is your only student in this hypothetical, made up, time machine back in time classroom that you have. Okay, let me know if you have any problems with anything. You can send me some drafts of your lesson plan if you just want to know that you're doing it correctly, you're on the right track, and I will give you some feedback on that. Okay, have a great weekend, everyone. I'll talk to you later. Bye-bye.